This is what Coleman Hughes
Let me
said
know.
about you.
Nick Fuentes knows exactly what he's doing. He is consciously playing this double game as part of a long-term strategy to become popular enough to take the reins of power.
True.
At which point he plans to pivot towards the extreme and unpopular policies that he advocates daily on Rumble.
So first of all, what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, I would say that Coleman Hughes is a propagandist. He works for the Free Press, which is run by Barry Weiss. So I think you have to consider the source. And Barry Weiss is a pro-Israel partisan. Free Press is just bought out by CBS for $150 million by Larry Ellison or his son, David Ellison. And so I think that's coming from a particular point of view. We can't pretend like that's coming from a vacuum or from some fixed position. That's coming from a propaganda.
Let me know if we get copyright takedown, and then what I'll do is I'll run it in the background while I draw drawings. I'll probably draw drawings right now, matter of fact. But the truth is that, like, it's hot, it's now, I want to watch it.
Propaganda outlet that's in favor of Israel. That's first. But second, I would say he is right about the two personas. And I think that everybody understands this on some level. On my show, I make jokes and I use rhetoric and I'm hyperbolic because for a long time, I had an audience that was small on these like dissident platforms. I was on D Live for many years. A lot of people don't even know what that is. And so I had a small following and we had sort of like an in-group sense of humor and memes and things like that. And you talk about it one way on a freewheeling live stream when I'm by myself and I'm ranting and we make jokes and we play devil's.
Dude, I'm just going to say it right now. The "it's just jokes" defense to me is bullshit. We've had conversations with Nick Fuentes, like I said, a couple of years ago. I think somebody posted it in chat. They were a moderator, so they were able to post the link. But effectively, at least as of several years ago, Nick Fuentes wanted a Christian imperium. Now, he's not going to be able to do that, I don't think, in his lifetime. I don't think that he's going to be able to do that. But he can vouch for the ideology to the point that it becomes popularized, where people clamor for a king or a dictator. And you guys saw that. I don't know if you saw that, but Laura Loomer and Kevin Sorbo, who are two Trump D riders like there's no business, they were like, oh, well, you know, the courts overruled Trump in this thing, so therefore we actually do want a king. A king doesn't sound so bad. And the good news is, at least for now on the right wing, Kevin Sorbo and Laura Loomer got dogpiled and called un-American pieces of garbage. But the fact that the veil is so thin between Trump cultists and Loomer and Kevin Sorbo's position should be scary to you. It's scary to me. And so we have to fight that tooth and nail as much as possible. So once again, Nick Fuentes saying it's just jokes doesn't work for me.
Advocate, we play with different positions. But then when you sit down in an interview like this one and people ask me a good faith question, what do you actually believe? Well, then I clarify and I say, well, here I'm not joking. Here I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not being rhetorical. I'll tell you precisely what I believe. As far as this idea that I'm going to get power and then turn into Hitler, that just sounds totally insane to me. I'll be honest. It just sounds insane.
Do you have aspirations for political power?
Not really. I think that if I wanted to run for office, I wouldn't say a lot of the things that I say. I don't know that a lot of people would vote for me. I tend to offend everybody, even a lot of people that like me. So no, I'm a truth teller. I like to tell the truth. I like to do my live stream.
Who is Nick Fuentes? Tell me about your upbringing. I know you grew up in the suburbs of Chicago.
Oh God, I hate that. I'm gonna skip the autobiography thing. Well, maybe I'll stay it because they might be asking about childhood stuff. But okay, Nick Fuentes himself does not want political power because he knows that he's radioactive to mainstream politics. What he does want is he wants people to watch his show, for them to enjoy his jokes, for them to buy into his ideology, and then for them to sneak into organizations like TPUSA, Daily Wire, and conservative politics, and the Republican Party, and for them to advocate for his ideology and his worldview. So asking him on an individual basis, does he want to be the best, does he want to be the next Hitler? No, He wants to be the propagandist that inspires the next great American dictator.
Tell me about your early years.
Or early how? Like my childhood or a little bit
your
later?
Childhood, yeah.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in LaGrange Park, as you say. My parents are ethnics. My father's half Mexican, half Irish. My mother's Italian. And they both came from a pretty rough upbringing themselves. They both were raised by single mothers, not because of divorce, but because both of their fathers had died. They endured a lot of dysfunction. And I think that's one of the reasons they came together and they related to each other and they wanted to create a normal upbringing for their children. They wanted to have a normal family life. And so they moved out to LaGrange Park away from the city. And they raised me and my sister and really put us first. I think that's a big reason why I tend to have a lot of these family values or Christian values. My mother...
Grassroots for 5, thank you for the donation, King. Fuentes hates Peter Thiel because he ain't him. Yeah, dude. Fuentes with a few $1 billion would absolutely back a dark horse, Trojan horse, vice president or congressman in order to try to implement his agenda over time. 100%. So once again, I feel like the whole I don't want political power thing, maybe not on an individual basis, but he obviously wants political power. Oh, okay, cool. Nice. I found a new button that I can click on.
Quit her job and stayed at home to raise us. And so I have a very close relationship with my parents, with my sister. We're a very tight family. And we grew up in a pretty idyllic town. And maybe we can sort of get into a conversation about politics from this. I loved my upbringing. My mom stayed at home. My dad was working. We're in a mostly white suburb in Chicago. I was maybe half Catholic, half Protestant. It was a baseball town. I played baseball for many years in Chicago.
Somebody says that Nick has a twin sister who until recently was not a groiper. She now appears to be a groiper, says Kay. Somebody needs to take one for the team and date Nick's sister. Okay. Somebody needs to Destiny. Well, we need you for one final mission. Destiny. We need you for one final goon mission. No, I got out of the game. I'm never going back. I paid my dues. I paid my price. I'm never coming back. No, Destiny. We need you for one more goon mission. Nice. Sorry, I know this might not be you guys might not be enjoying it as much as I am, but I am imagining the Rambo scene, where Rambo is he's like chopping firewood in the woods of Montana, or he's in Cambodia on a riverboat, or he's in Vietnam fighting cobras with his bare hands or whatever. But it's Destiny. It's Destiny in retirement. And he's playing League of Legends. He's playing League of Legends in a dark Miami condominium, and somebody kicks in the door and they're like, Destiny, we need you for one more minute. I'll let it go, but I hope that I've painted a vivid enough picture. Oh God.
But we love our hot dogs. We have our baseball parade and get a hot dog. And so I love where I came from. I love the city. It's a working class city. I love the people here. They're very good, humble, down to earth, decent people. And I guess I had my political, not to jump ahead, but this is a big part of where my political awakening came from. I sort of left this bubble, if you could call it that. When I went to college in 2016, I went to Boston University. And I read a lot of things online, and I realized the country does not look like LaGrange Park. It doesn't look like Western Springs or Hinsdale or Elmhurst. It looks very different. The country's undergoing a radical transformation because of immigration. And so I saw that and I said, this is not really a desirable change. I don't like the south side of Chicago or the west side or LA or certain parts of Boston as much as I like where I came from. And I guess that's what made me an American nationalist. I said, I want to preserve my home and the things that are familiar to me and the things I like about my home, what makes it America.
Guys, this is where you need to see the overlap, okay? Because there's different degrees of religious bigotry and racism, and I'm not even moral frogging. There's different level. I'm being descriptive. There are different levels of racism and bigotry between different groups, but the things that unite them under the Trump movement, in my opinion, is national conservatism. And like I've said before, whenever you hear the word nation, replace it with the word people. Okay. So Steven Crowder, despite being Canadian, is an American civic nationalist, in my opinion, based off of what he said in the earlier interview. He thinks that the American founding fathers had it correct, that freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of religion are correct, and that ultimately what makes America good is that you can be a plurality of Christian or a plurality of people and still fall under the American umbrella. And so I think, I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but I think that Steven Crowder, because he's a normie, he would concede to the possibility of a Muslim American nationalist who takes their faith seriously, but also takes the United States of America seriously. And so he would have a broader definition of who the people are within the United States, right? But when it comes to Nick Fuentes being a Christian nationalist, in my opinion, I think he would go back to the statement in the Declaration of Independence or original documents where they would say, for us and for our posterity. And then he would point to the quote from one of the founding fathers that says, the Constitution is for a moral people, and you cannot have a moral people without God or Jesus Christ or Christianity. He would probably point to that. And then he would also point to some of the states having laws where they enshrined that you had to be Christian in order to hold political office within the United States. And he would argue that not only are those things constitutional, they're in line with the vision of the founding fathers. Therefore, we have to bully secularists, atheists, trans people, gays, all the degenerates, all the liberal and progressive degenerates. We have to bully them out of cultural power. And then also we have to reinstantiate laws that allow the government to select exclusively for Christians. We have to dispossess Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs out of political power because this is a Christian nation. And then the government should be ruled, maybe with the Constitution, maybe without the Constitution, but it needs to be ruled in the Christian nation's interest. It needs to be Christendom. And so I would view that as an infinitely more extreme political proposition than Steven Crowder. And I want to make that clear because I think that Nick might not be obfuscating, meaning that he's using vague words in order to convey multiple definitions. But I think he might not be doing that intentionally. But I think that is the effect of the rhetoric that he just used.
So that's a little bit about my background. I don't know where you want to go with that, but that's kind of where I came from.
My first obvious question is, were your parents immigrants to the United States, or were their parents, or were they grandparents? In other words, at some stage, I presume there were immigrants in your family who came to the US. Is that correct?
There were. I believe my mother was fourth generation and my father was third generation. So their ancestors came here on my mom's side in the 1860s, I believe, the first wave of Italian immigration. My father's ancestors, I think they came around at the turn of the century in 1900.
So your view of immigration, and we'll get to the specifics about your views on immigration, are they not affected at all by the fact that if it wasn't for immigration, you wouldn't exist as an American?
Well, I would certainly exist, but like you said, maybe not as an American. Certainly that's influenced in some measure. But I think that the kind of immigration that we had for a long time in the country, it's different than the immigration that we have now. And let's just say for openers, it's different immigrants. They're coming from a different place with a different culture, a different religion. It's not the same as it was. So first, you have a qualitative difference. My ancestors, for the most part, I have three European grandparents from Ireland and Italy, one from Mexico. They came from Europe. They came from a society where there's a common ancestry, there's a common religion, common civilization. The people that have come in since 65, since Hart-Celler, they're coming from China, India, the Northern Triangle, Mexico, Venezuela. And so first, they're just different people. Secondly, it's a quantitative difference. There's way more, and it's an unceasing, always increasing wave. For the first 3 or 4 waves of immigration, you would have a major influx of immigrants and then it would stop. And then you'd have another wave and then it would stop. This one, it just keeps going up for 35 years and it's too many. So that's really where I would draw the distinction between maybe where I originate from. I would even just simply call that immigration. What this is an invasion. It's a completely different policy.
But you
can't even call it the same thing.
You mentioned Mexico in that list, and your father is half Mexican. So,
yeah,
I mean, by your criteria, part of the invasion would include your father, presumably, and his immediate descendants who came from Mexico.
Not really true, because when my father's ancestors came here, it was a small fraction of the total immigrants that came from Mexico. I don't believe that we should have 0 immigrants forever, or even 0 immigrants from non-white countries. But you have to draw the distinction. My father's father, he was here in the 40s and 50s. It was his parents, or I believe either his parents or grandparents, that came here even earlier. Up until 1965, 90% of the immigrants were coming from Europe. I have no problem with that. If we have 10% of them coming from Mexico or Latin America, maybe that's reasonable, but that's not what it is now. Now you've got 10 million illegals in 4 years under Joe Biden, and you got millions more legal immigrants from China, India, Venezuela, El Salvador. And it's so many with no break for assimilation. And they're all from non-white countries. It's transforming what America is. And again, that's the distinction. That's what makes it unacceptable.
I always...
Okay. So I'm just going to show y'all Google Maps real quick, because this is frustrating to me. And then I'm also going to continue to bully Beef Supreme because I feel like it. But South America maps. Okay, let's go here real quick. This is what frustrates me about Nick's perspective, and I still haven't heard a good rebuttal to this line of argumentation. So when you're talking about South America, there's half a dozen major states. You got Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile. You have Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. And then same thing with Central America, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. And there's 2 languages that are spoken in South America, although there's probably many more, but the 2 major languages are Portuguese and Spanish. And so when you look at Europe, what happened was the people from Portugal and Spain, through colonial happenstance, they went to the Caribbean first, and then they started exploring Central and South America and colonizing it. And the cultural product in Central and South America is the indigenous people, because the Spanish engaged in, let's call it, involuntary sexual activity with Native Americans. And then they also imported black folk from West Africa in order to work these lands. And so we have a large population of slaves in Brazil. We have a large population of slaves in the Caribbean. And so this cultural byproduct is that of Spanish people, not Puerto Ricans, although Puerto Ricans is funny enough to bring up, Spanish people and Portugal, right? Now, there is a difference in Europeans, right? Which is there are Mediterranean Europeans, those who live along the coast, and there are Northern Europeans, which are, arguably the French are a blend of Mediterranean and Northern European, but there's Northern European, Germans, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, English, Welsh, Irish, there's Saxons, there's Anglos, there's Normans, there's all sorts of different ethno-religious heritage in Northern Europe that could be defined culturally different from Mediterranean Europeans, but they're still both European. And also, the Spanish did still have impact in the United States through Florida and also through the southwestern United States, which they ruled up until the United States took it in the Mexican-American War. And so we have Quebec, which is a French territory. We had Louisiana, which was a French territory. We had the 13 colonies, which was an Anglo project. We have Canada, which is an Anglo project. And then we had a whole host of, no offense, because I consider myself a member of this, we had Euro trash coming into this country, right? I am a part of the Irish Euro trash that came into this country and settled in Boston. My great grandparents are a combination of Irish, and then also I think we have Pennsylvania Dutch, which are Germans, but they said that they were like on the border with the Czech Republic. Where's Czechoslovakia? So my other great grandparents, my other great grandparents were Germans who were maybe Czech as well. So they were also Euro trash, and they came in here. So my question is like, why are these things incompatible? Why is a European colonial society from Spain and Portugal, that's down here and in here, why is that incompatible with a European colonial society that comes from up here? What about being Christian? What about being Catholic? What about speaking Spanish versus English? What about having Native American ancestry? What about having Black ancestry makes you incompatible with the propositional American project? And I don't really get a good answer. What I think ends up happening is they kind of just like allude to this like vague incompatibility of Hispanics because they're, I don't know, like swarthy. They're brown skin. They speak Spanish. They got Latinas with thick booties. I don't know, but they appeal to this vague incompatibility, but it's not even like a good argument. Whereas if you were using like cultural incompatibility from like China, I would have arguments about why you're wrong, but I would understand it. They're like Shinto, or they're Buddhist, or they're atheist, and they were raised in a communist society. There's arguments why a Chinese person might not want to integrate into American society, but they would just want to take advantage of it economically. Or people from the Middle East and North Africa who are Islamist, where they want to become Muslim theocrats. They're just biding their time until they can populate the United States large enough that they can convert it into a Muslim theocracy, which will probably never happen. But at the same time, like, you could argue that an Islamist or a Chinese communist is culturally incompatible with the American project. Anyways, I just bring up all of that like geopolitical, geographic history because I find Nick's argumentation unconvincing. Grassroots for $20. Thank you, King. Nick shouldn't be ashamed to be Mexican. Like, I'm not ashamed to be Puerto Rican. I'm not Puerto Rican enough to get the pass, but I'm Puerto Rican enough that I stole my jet ski's spinning rims off of Doobie's jet ski. I'll like that. Thank you, King. Quick show. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. My parasocial love you. Thank you for being here.
I always believe everybody is a product of their environment. Right? I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. Said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on that anecdote that you say on your own podcast, is do you think you grew up in a racist environment, that your father was inherently racist, and that thought process moved to you?
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
Yeah, but he's not here to defend himself.
You are.
And my parents are.
You told the story.
And I will. And I'll
I'm not trying to ambush you. As I said at the start, Nick, to be clear.
No, it's not.
Bruh, the pearl clutching. The pearl clutching. It's a new low to read my quote back to me. It's a new low to read my quote back to me because my father isn't here to defend himself, even though it's an anecdote that I told about my father. And I'm asking you a question about how you became the way that you became. Bruh. Sorry. I'm with Pierce on this one. I cannot believe that he's pearl clutching over that. Why can't he be like, yeah, you know what? I love my father. I think he's a great man. I think he's done XYZ, ABC, totally correct. He has some views that might be abrasive to society at large. But or you could be like, oh man, I was exaggerating how racist my dad was because I didn't want my audience to think he was a lib cuck. You have many options here. You can defend if your dad is a liberal or has become more liberal over time. You can say, well, he used to be like giga conservative and kind of racist, but he's more liberal now. Or you could say, yeah, my dad's a giga chad and he's not a soy cuck loser who cares about racial dynamics. And he's hostile to members of other races. Wow. I'm not going to lie. Pierce with the uppercut, that was impressive, actually.
Not an ambush,
Nick,
but
to be clear,
I think
I'm
everybody
not
understands.
ambushing you. I'm literally reading an anecdote that you revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in the public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you. It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
Sure.
No, my parents are not racist and they've never been racist. I'll tell you about my parents. They used to have a school in Chicago in the South Loop where they instructed people on how to shoot firearms. It was a security school and most of the clients were black. And I believe actually one of their clients was Larry Hoover's son at one point, sort of a funny story. And so most of their clients would come in from the South side of Chicago.
I'm not racist. My parents taught black self-defense classes. Yo, this is based. This is so based, dude. I'm gonna start using that one. I'm not racist. I taught black self-defense classes. Perfect out, Nick. That was awesome.
My grandmother, she grew up in the projects in the city. And so my family being in Chicago, being ethnics, being Italian, Irish, Mexican in the West Side on Taylor Street, all over the city. My family for many generations have lived near and around black people. And look, my views about black people and their views about black people are shaped with experiences with black people.
That doesn't mean they're not racist.
And what they will tell you, what my parents would say if they were here, is that for many, many years, the older generations of black people were very
they're not racist. Proceeds to explain racism, which, by the way, I don't care. I don't care. I do not moral frog about racism where I'm like, oh, you're a racist. We never have to listen to you ever again. That's not how I converse. That's not how I think. That's not how I want my audience to think. But I do think it's mad funny that he's like, my parents aren't racist. They taught a black self-defense class. And also their racism is rooted in the fact that they have lots of experience with young black people who did not behave the same way that older, more respectful black people behaved. Listen, man, just say like, hey, we're all a little racist. It is what it is. Now I understand Piers Morgan is like a huge platform. So I understand like why he's uncomfortable. But dude, hats off to Piers Morgan. I actually think he's like, it's not an ambush. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit of an ambush. It's a little bit of an ambush. It's a great ambush though.
Respectful, very humble, very decent. In fact, my grandma used to have an anecdote. She grew up in a lot of dysfunction. Her mother was mentally ill. and they would be having dinner in the projects, and there'd be so much chaos and dysfunction and disagreement and fighting. And she would look across the way out the window at a black family in the other apartment, and they'd be holding hands around the table saying grace. And this is sort of the culture that used to prevail. But now what you have in the city is that there's no accountability for the black people. And now Chicago has become a complete dump because these teenagers go out and they take over the city. They call them teen takeovers. That's the euphemism for it. They're teenagers, but they all come from the same neighborhood. They drive up there and they mug people and attack people, and they destroy cars and destroy shops. We had the Festival of Lights a couple of weeks ago. It's supposed to be a family event, and they light up the trees, and they, there's a big parade. I was in the parade one year, and you had a bunch of black people there shooting each other. 7 people shot, a 14-year-old killed in the Magnificent Mile. And I know there's a lot of black people that feel the same way about this. They say, we've lost control of the city and we're looking for accountability.
I'm not racist. Explains why I'm racist. It's so based. This is so based. But once again, I'm gonna challenge Beef Supreme, okay, real quick, all right, because we've been fighting about this. Beef Supreme's synonym rolls. Okay, you're not gonna be able to get me off of this, all right? No person shall recklessly cause inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm to another person by doing any of the following. And the subsection is insulting, taunting, or challenging another under circumstances in which that conduct is likely to provoke a violent response. Now, I have the definition set up here. Fighting words definition: words that indicate a willingness to fight or challenge someone, or that are likely to cause a confrontation. So words that indicate, or words that are likely to cause a confrontation. Okay, so that's the definition of fighting words. Insult: speak or to treat with disrespect or scornful abuse. Taunt: provoke or challenge someone with insulting remarks. Remarks: say something as a comment or a mention. Confrontation: a hostile or argumentative meeting or situation between opposing parties. Okay, so this is the definition of disorderly conduct, subsection A3, with synonyms put in. Yeah, a squad wiper says unblocked. Behave yourself or I'll block you. Okay. Insulting, which is speaking disrespectfully. Taunting: provoke or challenge someone with insults. Or challenging, which I didn't define, another under circumstances in which that conduct is likely to provoke a violent response. Confrontation: a hostile or argumentative meeting or situation between opposing parties. So number one, because I think what's his face is back. Squad wiper was saying that maybe he can argue it's unconstitutional, but he's saying that you cannot be incarcerated for words. That's incorrect. Here's the Ohio state statute. Okay. Beef Supreme says, if that's a crime, Connor, how come you're not in trouble for your stream language? Because you haven't reported me to law enforcement. Also, we're not in each other's physical presence. Also, I'm not, like, I'm in public in that I'm on the internet on a public stream. I'm not in public in that I am, in public in a way in which I can start a fight. I can't cause disorderly conduct within the curtilage of my own home. So anyways, generally you cannot be incarcerated for words alone. Dude, these are words. I'm showing you synonyms. An insult is speak or treat with disrespect or scornful abuse. Speak being an operative word. That's words. Well, there you go. Valor Media says, lol, not what I said. I spent like 6 months in jail for accusations about my speech. Well, then there you go. Also, a squad wiper, if you're so annoying that you get suspended and banned within like 2 hours of being in my chat, and you spent 6 months in jail for talking shit, why wouldn't you assume that you're the problem, right? If you wake up and you bump into one asshole, well, there's an asshole. If you bump in and you bump it, or if you wake up and you bump into 2 assholes, well, maybe it's a tough day. If you wake up and you bump into a bunch of assholes, you're the asshole. So I'm just telling you, you should probably reevaluate your life. So anyways, I don't need to. Yeah. Anyways, I don't need to illustrate this further, but the point is that my 2 points are thus. Number one, you can go to jail or prison for speech. Okay. Number two, Fighting words is a substatute of the disorderly conduct statute in the state of Ohio. And most states will have a fighting words or disorderly conduct statute that can get you in jail or prison just for words. That's it. All right. Let us go back to Piers Morgan. I do think it's mad funny that Piers Morgan pressed Nick Fuentes about his family. And I'm kind of happy he did it because it opened up this entire really interesting line of questioning. Because I've wondered this, by the way. I've wondered about how Nick Fuentes became Nick Fuentes. Every supervillain has an origin story. So the villain origin story of Nick Fuentes being that his dad didn't want to take him to Applebee's because there was too many black people in the kitchen crew, that actually makes a lot of sense.
We have a lot of black people that are always outraged about racism, outraged about attitudes from white people, but they're never ashamed of some of these behaviors, never ashamed.
Beef Supreme says, you really haven't illustrated anything besides what the text of the law says, not how it's used or applied. All right, buddy. All right, buddy, Beef Supreme. Yeah, me, law enforcement officer for 4 years, absolutely seen people, when in doubt, resisting without. I've seen people absolutely get hacked with a disorderly conduct arrest that then turned into resisting it without and then going to jail for it. Of course, similar to Squad Wiper, though. Squad Wiper says that those cases oftentimes get dropped. Yeah, they oftentimes get dropped because the cops don't do good documentation of the incident in line with the statute. They're just doing that. They're effectively charging you with contempt of cop. So it's surprising to me that Squad Wiper says that he spent 6 months in jail. I'm assuming you didn't have enough to spend, like, pay for bond, because resisting without violence and also disorderly conduct are both misdemeanors. So I don't know how you spent so much time in jail. Beef Supreme says, I just don't know why you can't concede the facts of the matter, because you're wrong, Beef. You're wrong. Insulting, taunting, or challenging another under circumstances in which that conduct is likely to provoke a violent response. This is a statute in your state. Insulting involves words. Taunting involves words. Challenging involves words. Definitionally. Right here. You can read the definitions for yourself. I cannot make this easier for you. Insulting, speaking disrespectfully. Taunting, provoking or challenging someone with insults, or challenging another under circumstances in which that conduct is likely to provoke a violent response. Violent response is a synonym for confrontation. Confrontation, a hostile or argumentative meeting or situation between opposing parties. I have baked you a beautiful synonym roll. Okay? Yeah, yes, I do, Beef Supreme. Okay, then do you have examples of someone being sent to jail for speech? All the time. People get sent to jail all the time for assault. Assault is a speech-based offense. I'm sorry to the VOD viewers for going down a roll, but fucking Beef Supreme has little brother syndrome. I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna get done. Assault Florida state statute. So, assault. An assault is an intentional, unlawful threat by word or act to do violence to another person, coupled with apparent ability to do so, and doing some act in which it creates a well-founded fear in such another person that violence is imminent. Yeah, dude. I had a domestic violence where a boyfriend said that he was going to beat the shit out of his girlfriend, and those were just words, and I took him to jail for assault. Beef Supreme says, I just know I'm right. No, I've actually shown you 2 examples of where you can go to jail for speech. And that's the enshrined law of the state.
Just some of the things that go on. And that's why I think there's a lot of negative
But Simo says, quit looking at the statutes and look at people actually convicted. I took a person to jail for assault. Threats or assaults isn't hate. Yeah, he said words. Christian Valeris, assault is words. All right. I'm good. I'm good. Beef Supreme says Connor stop with this dense bullshit. No, you guys are saying you cannot go to jail for words. Threatening somebody is words. If I say I'm going to beat your ass, I have not engaged in physical violence with you. I haven't punched you. I haven't karate chopped you. I haven't kicked you. I haven't elbow slammed you. I said, I'm going to beat your ass. That is assault in the context of you have the immediate and apparent ability to do it. Yes, I've taken somebody to jail for that. I think they pled out with the state's attorney's office because we had video. Anyways, I'm right. You're wrong. Suck a bean.
Attitudes these days. And so, you know, again, I think those attitudes, you say I'm a product of my environment. I am. And so are my parents and my grandparents. Unlike you, because you're not even American, in Chicago, we have to live in a big, diverse city where there's a lot of different kinds of people. And I think anybody.
Thank you, Real Serious. Real Serious gets it. It's not assault. It's sodium chloride, dumbass. That's how I feel right now.
In Chicago, tell you the same.
I live in London. It's one of the biggest and most diverse cities in the world.
But it's not the same.
Well, actually, it's a big, diverse city. The only difference is we don't have the gun violence because we don't have guns. That's a whole different story. I don't want to get into that with you. I have got into that before.
You got
in America.
a knife problem. You got sword problems.
We have problems with
Aladdin.
We have problems with violent crime. I make no pretense of it. So the idea that somehow I'm cosseted in London because I'm not in Chicago.
I didn't say that.
Well, you kind of implied it, but I guess my point about the environment, I'm not saying you are a product of your environment. I'm saying most people are in some capacity. Mm. When I read that anecdote, which just to remind you, it's not something I have put out there. You told this story, right? And you said that
you said this. We're looping. You said this already.
But you haven't really directly, I think, responded to it, which is whether your father would not take you to certain restaurant chains because he associated them with Black Americans. Is that true?
No, well, see here, if you're in America, you would say that Olive Garden is not real Italian food. Applebee's, TGI Fridays, this stuff is a load of crap. My dad was just a food snob, but no, it's got nothing to do with that. My best friend in first grade was a Black guy. We're not a racist family. So
okay, so when you told
no.
Piers, I know that you have clip after clip after clip after clip of me talking about resegregating America and me believing that there is something inherent and biological in reference to Black criminality. However, I am not racist. My best friend in first grade was Black, and my parents taught Black self-defense classes. There's absolutely no way that we're racist. Awesome.
Story, I'm just curious. So when you told that anecdote, which clearly on the face of it is racist, right? You're basically saying your father made racist decisions about where you would go as a family to eat. Are you saying, well, I'm just going to ask you a question. Are you saying that when you told that story, you didn't mean to infer that he was racist? And do you understand why when somebody like me reads that anecdote for the first time, as I did this week, I reach a different conclusion?
Bell Runner for 10 says, peace be upon the grill community. Grill Shallah, indeed, King. Thank you very much. Want to shout out the MVPs this stream. Thank you, Fell Runner. Thank you, Grassroots. Thank you, Grassroots again. Thank you, Grassroots again. Thank you, Fell Runner. And thank you, Deus Halcyon and Grassroots again. Thank Grassroots and Deus Halcyon particularly for the gifted memberships. And thank you, everybody else, for the super chats. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them. Parasocial love. Let's go.
Well, I understand what you're doing, which is a sort of making of a murderer. How did he become racist? Well, his father didn't.
Bro, the villain origin story. Let's go.
Literally reading out.
Because he said that's not real Italian food. Hang on. Can I? What's with the interruptions? Can I explain?
I'm literally reminding you of something you said on your show, which led me to conclude a certain thing. If I'm wrong, tell me.
Yeah, it was said in jest as a humorous anecdote, and now you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is his parents are racist. He comes from a long line of racists.
My parents would not tolerate me. Sorry for yawning. My parents would not tolerate me saying on the internet what Nick Fuentes says. If I said what Nick Fuentes said on the internet, number one, you might see grandma points show up, grab me by the ear, drag me into a bathroom, and wash my mouth out with soap. That's like the first thing that you might see. The second thing that you might see is if I continued with this behavior, they would actually disown me. Any social media they had, any public presence they had, if anybody communicated with them ever that I was communicating, let's call it Holocaust revisionism about numbers. Let's call it Holocaust skepticism. Let's call it sanitization of Hitler, or sanitization of Joseph Stalin, or the vilification of America, or just like racist antipathy towards like blacks and Jews. My parents would absolutely disown the fuck out of me if this happened. And the fact that Nick Fuentes' family hasn't disowned him, and his sister has arguably become a part of the political movement, that actually makes me suspect exactly what Piers Morgan is implying, is that he learned some of this from his parents. Now, maybe his parents aren't as hostile to Jews, or aren't as hostile to black people, or aren't as hostile to whatever, but they would probably just say that they're like, they're not racist, they're race realist, right? Like they don't hate black people, they just expect black people to engage with society poorly. I'm assuming that's how they did it. Yeah, his sister. Yeah, he's got a sister.
And I think everybody knows my parents are boomers. Mm-hmm. And these people you're
Yeah, and by the way, right here, Beef Supreme, I'm scrolling through it. Generally, you cannot be incarcerated for words alone. You know this. Threats are words, so you're just wrong. Squad Wiper says, lol, not what I said at all. I spent 100 days in jails for accusation of speech. Okay, well, then already know. You already know.
a boomer, I guess, too, in a way,
60.
right? You were born
I'm
in
60.
what, 19? Yeah, so you're a boomer also. Or maybe you're a Gen Xer. I suppose it's sort of on the cusp. But it's a humorous anecdote. These are kind of the attitudes of baby boomers in society, but you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is you're a product of your environment. Your dad's racist because of this joke. Now you're a racist. And I don't think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. People can make their own minds up. They can go back and listen to you say it. I mean, the beauty of what I'm going to talk to you about in this interview is that almost all of it is just going to be reminding you what you have said and asking you what you meant. Your position about that story is that it was a joke, okay? I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true. Everything.
It's jokes, except for when it's not. And the one time I have what could be a joke, I'm going to embrace it. Thank you, Piers, for the content. Thank you, Piers. All hail Piers Morgan. All hail Piers Morgan for the content. Oh, my God.
Thing I said in that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them?
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
This is beautiful. Okay. So if Nick was sane, all right, if Nick was sane, what he would say is, well, we obviously have a criminality problem within the black community. And, I think it's at least partially cultural. And, I'm sure 99% of black folk are decent, hardworking, working class people. But there's some people, because he's watched Counterpoints, he's watched my show. There's a subset within the black community who views crime as another vocation. They raise their children to think that burglarizing and dealing drugs in their teenage years is their job. And that as they grow up, especially in the later teenage years, that is oftentimes the demographic that's participating most in violence. So I do want to see a maximal state effort in order to try to break the cycle of poverty and crime. However, I also do think that some people can't be rehabilitated and they need to be incarcerated. Now, that would be the sane answer. Okay, that would be the sane answer. Why do I have a feeling that he's going to go for universal basic jail, like grassroots hegemon, but exclusively for black people? Like, let's see, because he could have embraced the statement, and then he might walk it back a little bit in his rebuttal. But I do want to see how he plays this, because this is going to be really, really, really interesting.
Whatever the percentages of the murderers, I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe
okay, but that's not for the most part, is it? That's not for the most part, is it? That's an extremely hyperbolic statement compared to 1 in 20. 1 in 20 is 5%. Okay.
say that 5%.
Oh, so you're talking.
There you go. All right. He walked it back. He had the opportunity to say it was a joke, and actually 5%, the people who commit a disproportionate amount of homicides are the people who deserve to be incarcerated. That's interesting. Wow. Walked it back like a motherfucker. Yeah, exactly. Jonah boy, exactly. Some, I assume, are good people. Damn, how is Piers owning this guy so hard? This is awesome.
Talking about black people who murder people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't say that.
That's
You
the
just
crime
said
problem.
blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. You didn't clarify that you were talking about black murderers.
Right. No, you're right. That's a good addition to that. That's a great point.
Do you think it's funny, or
I think, yeah, I do. I think it's hilarious. I think it's totally true.
do you think a black American would find it funny? You think that blacks should be imprisoned for the most part?
Blacks are my biggest fans. I get high fives all the time. They say, Nick Fuentes, I love your show. They agree with me. And you want to know why? Here's the difference. Black people are the most victimized by other black people. You think black people want to live in the hood and the ghetto and get shot all the time? That's what happens in the south side of Chicago. You should come here. I'll take you there. We could go to Garfield.
PTC says there's a subset of all people who see crime as a career. This is dumb. Okay. Do you agree with me that those people should be incarcerated? Because I mean, that's what I'm saying. So regardless of black, white, Hispanic, working class, middle class, upper class, or whatever, if there's a subset of any community that views criminality as a vocation, we should probably have programs when, as they're growing up, there should be off ramps where they don't have to pursue crime as a vocation. But if they engage in crime as a vocation, should they be incarcerated? My answer is 100% yes. 100%.
My son went to Chicago University for a year, actually, several years ago.
Yeah, that's a bubble. That's a bubble. You think you're in Chicago and Hyde Park? You don't know Chicago. Go a little bit west, see what it's like over there. And I'll tell you, black people agree with me because they're tired of it too. And maybe not most of them, but a lot of them agree with what I say about that because they know how it is. That's why the first thing they do when they make a little bit of money is they go and leave to another neighborhood.
Okay, so what was it? Just remind me again.
John Kaplan says, I'm confused. Why weren't the asshole funeral protesters arrested for fighting words? I think they were. Westboro, and then it got tested. I think it got appealed. Westboro Baptist Church arrests. Veteran accused of stalking Westboro Baptist Church. Protester arrested for letting son stomp on the flag. Facts and summary, Snyder versus Phelps. This could be a civil case. Fred Phelps and his followers at the Westboro Baptist Church believe that God punishes the United States for its tolerance of homosexuality, particularly within the military. To demonstrate their belief, Phelps and his followers have picketed military funerals. Albert Snyder's son, Lance Corporal Matthew Snyder, was killed in line of duty in Iraq in 2006. Westboro picketed Matthew Snyder's funeral, displaying signs that state, for instance, God hates the USA, thank God for 9/11, thank God for dead soldiers, and don't pray for the USA. The church notified local authorities in advance that they intended to picket the funeral, staged the picket on public land adjacent to a public street, and complied with all police instructions. Church members also sang hymns and recited Bible verses. Although Albert Snyder could see the tops of the picket signs on the day of the funeral, he could not read what was written on them, and it was not until he saw a news story about the funeral and the picketing he became aware of the church's message. Snyder sued Phelps and the church, claiming, among other things, that their actions caused him severe emotional distress. In defense, Phelps argued that his speech, the picketing and signs, was protected under the First Amendment. So, I mean, you could find out maybe it got dismissed for the First Amendment, but these are reasonable, in my opinion. So they had extremely inflammatory signs that, if seen by the family, would result in a fistfight. However, what they did is they did not go to the funeral itself. They were a reasonable distance away. They notified law enforcement of their location beforehand. And it wasn't until even after the fact that the alleged victims in this case became aware of it. So I think that actually points to a strong case for them trying to comply with the law while engaging in extremely hyperbolic speech. So if this was left up to me, I would dismiss this case. Now, here's the thing though. If they walked up to the funeral procession, let's say that the funeral home or the cemetery, let's say the cemetery was open to the public and they brought those signs to the funeral, yeah, you better believe they're going to get charged with disorderly conduct. Maybe the state attorney dismisses it, but I would 100% throw bracelets on somebody who brings a sign that says "Thank God for 9/11" and what's the other one? Thank God for dead soldiers. Yeah, don't pray for the USA. If they showed up with this to a funeral, 100% they're getting charged with disorderly. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Because going over there is a form of harassment, and it's still speech. It's still their freedom of conscience, but their freedom. Beef Supreme says, "Wow, Connor doesn't believe in freedom of speech." No, I do. I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. And by the way, they engaged in that. They stayed on public land. They notified law enforcement. They stayed a respectful distance away. Suck a dick. I also believe in the assault definition, where if you threaten somebody with violence and you are capable of delivering that violence, then you could be charged with assault. 100%. Beef Supreme says, no, you clearly just said you don't. Okay, Beef Supreme, you don't believe in freedom of the Second Amendment because I have autism.
The percentage of black.
Connor says the point is that they're not being charged because of the words they are speaking, but the manner in which they use those words. Okay, I think that they should be free to say those things, but not in the presence of other people. It's still words. All you're saying is that it's not the words themselves that is banned, which I agree with. I don't think you should ban any kind of words. I do think that you should ban lolicon. I do think that you should ban child pornography. But yeah. Anyways, that was Beef's main point. What was Beef's main point? Beef's main point is that speech with context can lead to incarceration. That's what. Why would I disagree with that statement? Why did you think I disagreed with that statement? What are you talking about? It's still speech. All right. Anyways, you guys have fun. I'm going to continue the content.
Men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100.
Sorry, I must thank the super chatters. Fell Runner with a 10. Peace be unto the grill community. Grill shall lie. I think I read that one. Real serious for 100 ARS. Thank you, King. When Fuentes says 1 in 20 black people should be in jail and then laughs when Piers Morgan tries to clarify, it's because he literally thinks a percentage of black people should be incarcerated no matter what they did. Yes. I'm real serious. Even if he would argue, no, only the criminals, that's obviously the implication of his hyperbolic speech. So he can't get ass mad that people take him for his words.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No. Less than 1 in 100 black US men commit murder. That's the most up to date.
What? I'm sorry. I'm going to move on the content, I promise. But what? I'm just going to move on. How about that? That's easier.
Date crime statistics in America.
That's not true. I've seen other statistics. They say 1 in 20 will eventually commit a murder.
So your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say.
Yeah, there's a report, I believe, on X by Data Hazard. I'll have to go and double check that for you. But yes, there's some pretty shocking evidence that says that it's far more alarming than you would think.
Okay, but you would accept that the official crime statistics are 1 in 100, or you wouldn't accept that statistic?
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen other evidence. Like I said, Data Hazard on X, I believe, produced a report about a year ago. It said 1 in 20. But I mean, whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers. I mean,
Sure,
this is
a lot of white
problem.
people commit murder too. Well, they do, don't they?
Okay, but it's about proportionality. I mean, white people are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody would tell you that more black people proportionally commit violent crime than white people. And people
per capita. Tell them about per capita.
People vote with their feet. People would rather pay a much higher property tax.
Most mass shootings.
What's with the interruptions?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you look at in Chicago, in New York, these neighborhoods are so stratified. People would rather pay a high tax rate. They'd rather pay a much higher property value to live in a less diverse, less black neighborhood because they don't want to live around the violence. And I think that when you look at even on the public transit, the subway, the blue line, you know, people don't want to go there because they know who occupies and menaces the public transit. It is these people like Daniel Penny had to deal with. It's people like Irina Zarutska had to deal with. And that's just the uncomfortable reality.
You've also said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you went really got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically
because
sure he's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to the everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody. The difference is you're attacking my father. You know, he could get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all.
Well, then let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on, Nick. You put that story into the public domain.
Bro, get wrecked by your own words. Listen, Piers, I think, is a drama-mongering, Brit Bong, clout shark, narcissist who sweeps for his friends and attacks his enemies on levels that are so obviously grossly hypocritical to anyone on the outside that it's clear that oftentimes what he's doing is clout brain, not, you know, anything else. Like any principles that Piers Morgan has had over the years have been totally overruled by clout brain. However, I think it also stands to reason that Piers Morgan has actually set up a decent ambush for Nick Fuentes, where, like Steven Crowder, like the other people, they could have just come on and been like, oh, do you hate Jews? And then Nick could have been like, no. And then I've been like, oh, okay, moving to the next segment. Instead, what he did is he got an exact quote from Nick Fuentes about his own father and his own upbringing and race realism in his household. He pressed him on whether or not his perspectives were informed by his family. He's pressed him on, you know, at least 2 clips that are horrific. And Nick has said, like, the most, like, no offense, like, he kind of jumped on a rake, in my opinion. Now, I think the jumping on the rake is going to play well to his base. Him laughing about, you know, saying that most blacks need to be incarcerated or whatever, and then we would live in paradise. And then him just being like, yeah, what of it? Like, I think that's going to play to the Groyper base. But I think anything outside of the Groyper base is going to be like, wow, this dude sucks, right? So, yeah, I know. Nobody, Mr. 2146. What a timeline that Piers is right. Dude, Pierce's clout shark hunger brain made him do a better rhetorical takedown of Nick Fuentes than anybody else I've seen. Today, we were watching the Steven Crowder Nick Fuentes interview. And by the way, it was good. It was like surprisingly good in a lot of ways. But it was like charitable and earnest, in my opinion. There was a little bit of pressing, but the pressing made sense. This is actually forcing Nick to look at the worst things that he said, which I think is brilliant. I think it's brilliant. Jonah says, isn't 1350 stat flawed in that the 50 is actually arrests? If you look at how many go to get convicted in the sentence, that 50 only goes down to 1350 goes way down. Sure, but convictions are way more difficult than arrests. And also, I think it's also for 1350. I also just think it's like homicides. Like they studied like intra-racial homicide, and like every single race, 90% of their own race is what kills them. So for white people kill white people, black people kill black people, Asians kill Asians for the most part. There's still 10 or 20% that's like intra-racial, where it's between black and white, or white on black, or Asian on black, or black on Asian, or whatever. The point is that when it comes to homicides, half of homicide victims are black men, and 90% of the people who commit those homicides are black. That's the argument, is that if we got the black population of the United States down to the homicide levels of the whites or the Asians, then we effectively would have a homicide rate almost on par with Europe. We would actually have like a 2 per 100,000. So, and that would be great. I would love to have a society. So you know what I want to do? I want to fix systemic racism. That way everybody can say racial slurs without any guilt. And then I want to incarcerate the bad guys. And that's it. Let's fix systemic racism, okay? That way we can all say the naughty words.
On your show, I'm simply reminding you of what you told everybody, millions of people, about your father. If you now want to retract it, fine. If you want to say it was a joke, which is what your position was earlier, fine. But I'm allowed to put to you things you've said publicly. That's not unfair.
True.
That's not me targeting your father. You put that story about him out
You know
there.
what you're doing. You know what you're doing.
I'm asking you about a pretty shocking anecdote, which to me looked like you were saying your father made decisions about where you as a family would eat based on skin color of people who worked at these places. If you say, or use them, if you say that is not what you meant, that's fine. You can respond any way you like. But the idea I can't ask you about it without you saying I'm attacking your father is ridiculous.
Well, you are, and you know what you're doing. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job. And if you go on here and say, you charge him with racism or something, and I'm put in a position where I don't look like I'm sticking to my guns if I don't say my father's a racist, you're putting him in jeopardy, and he's not here to defend himself or explain his views. And it's very low, and I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views, and I think that, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father, because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well, then do you accept that you shouldn't talk? Okay, listen, that's fine. But then do you accept you shouldn't talk about your father on your show? And you shouldn't tell...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So it's fine for you to put a story out there which would make most people who listened to that story or watched it at the time on your show conclude that he was racist. It's fine for you to do that. But if I then ask you about it, I'm the one who's being unfair and I've crossed a line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're
That's
being
fine.
malicious.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, people are watching this live. They can draw their own conclusions about whether what I just did.
And they will.
Yeah, and I'm sure afterwards, by the way, you'll say, he ambushed me with your own words.
Whoa.
With your own words.
That's a little presumptuous. I'm not going to say it's an ambush, but I think that's a low blow. And I think you know what you're doing, and that's fine. You're a tabloid journalist. I expected that. I don't think it's an ambush because I knew it would be like this. And people will see what you're doing, and I think they'll say it's low. But as far as you want to talk about racism, I do. Let's talk about racism. Let's leave my dad out of it.
Look, you've admitted you're a racist, correct?
Yes, 100%. Okay. Own it.
Okay.
Terrence Stepney says, just say y'all don't like us black people for clear reasons. Jesus is America. You can be racist. No, I like black folk just fine. Like I said, 98% of black folk are perfectly decent, hardworking people. We drew this earlier, by the way. I'll pull it up. This is my metric for whether or not I can call you a part of the American project. All right. Number one, you have to agree with me about disorderly conduct. Number two, this is what I care about. If you can subscribe to freedom of conscience and freedom of speech, pay your bills, pay your taxes, leave everybody else alone, and as a result, Real Serious says, Connor, you need to keep up with chat. He's referring to Fuentes, not you. Okay, yeah, I think Fuentes does have antipathy towards black folk. Beef Supreme says, no one agrees with you on disorderly conduct. Beef Supreme, you're going to have to make a statement, okay? Right to self-defense up to and including against a tyrannical government, due process and equality before the law, prohibitions against cruel and unusual punishment. Okay? Because my statement, as far as I see it, let's do it. Let's do it. I have multiple times and you read them. Well, state it again, because apparently I'm not understanding you. State it one more time. I'll write it down. Boggin stuff says, I agree with Beef Supreme no matter what. Can you remove the pay your taxes bit? Okay, I'm asking you now, Beef Supreme, because my assertion is twofold. Because it started with whoever that guy is, and then it ended with you. You can and should be in you can and should be incarcerated for some words. That's my position. So what's your position? Because if you say, but I don't even want to straw man you. Words alone do not result in prison. Words alone do not result in prison. It is the other things that get you there, not words alone, but some other context. Okay, I'm going to tell you the way that I read this, and I'm going to tell you the way that I think you meant it. And I think this is just a failure of chat, where you don't have enough ability to articulate like a more fleshed out thought. Let me tell you the way that I took it, and let me tell you the way that the way that I think you mean it now. Okay, so what I'm thinking is, guy, standing in front of each other. They got really stubby legs for some reason. And that there is nothing that this guy can say, or vice versa, that can get them in jail. That's what I thought you were arguing. Because there are free speech absolutists who argue effectively that since speech itself is not violence, you should not be incarcerated even if you say some off-the-wall shit. Like, even if you promote terrorism, even if you engage in threats, even if you advocate for CP or, something illegal or whatever, you shouldn't go to jail. Because ultimately, when you read like the First Amendment, it says like Congress shall pass no rule abridging the freedom of speech. And so they're free speech absolutists. So that's what I understood you to say. What I think you're saying, though, which I do agree with, is that let's say Peter Hitchens, Chris Hitchens, I forget which one's which, okay? But there was Peter Hitchens, and he was in a crowded theater, because this is often used as an example, and he screamed, fire, fire, fire. And then he pointed out that he wasn't being arrested. But what his point was, is that because he did something that's oftentimes used as a legal example for when you can be incarcerated, because if you scream fire, you start a panic, and then it causes damage, then he's still not going to get incarcerated because it didn't cause the context in which it happened. Then he's not going to jail or prison. And he was correct. He didn't get incarcerated. There was no state investigation, et cetera, even though he did the textbook example of when speech can become something that you can be incarcerated for, which is falsely causing a panic in which there's injury, right? So if you're not saying the free speech absolutist perspective, and you are instead saying that the context matters thing, then I feel like we were just talking past each other for 45 minutes. And it's I'll take the blame. It's my fault for not understanding that you were saying the context matters thing instead of the free speech absolutism thing. Okay? So I'll save this as Beef Supreme what would you call that? Absolutism versus context. There we go. We resolved it, chat. We did it. We saved the city.
That's fine. You're perfectly entitled in a free democratic society to stare down the barrel of his camera and tell me you're a racist. People can judge you accordingly. Many people who have assumed that you're a racist will now have heard it from your own lips. That's fine.
There you go.
That's the point. The point of this interview is to go over the things you've said, which have led people to reach conclusions about you, and to ascertain whether those conclusions are fair and reasonable or not. That's it. So I want to play you another clip. This is where you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
You stand by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry.
That means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
Okay. Sorry.
You stand by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no,
wait, who lost in the situation where you hung out with black people for 30 seconds? Dude, is Piers Morgan a hero of the Republic? Has Piers Morgan destroyed Nick Fuentes? Has Piers Morgan done what no other interviewer could do? What is happening? Why is Piers Morgan our hero? What is happening? Oh my God.
I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. You look at the BLM movement, they said that the reason that black people are violent, or the reason there's crime, is because of police brutality, or redlining, or all these other things. They said we need to get rid of the police. We need to defund them. And a lot of cities did. A lot of cities like Chicago, for example, the police changed the rules of engagement. They don't chase them. It's not a felony if you steal a certain amount of merchandise. They won't chase them on foot. And now the city's totally up for grabs. And now, whether you're in the Gold Coast or whether you're on the Mag Mile or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot, you might get mugged, someone might run up on you. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person and get stabbed, mugged, whatever. And by the way, this is a strategy. They call it the friendly stranger. There's a crew of them. They do this in Chicago. They stand outside bars, black people. They approach strangers. It's a robbery crew. And they pretend to be a friendly stranger, and then they mug them. And stupid white people say, oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you. You know, they grin, they laugh, they put up with the nonsense, and then they get mugged, or worse. Sometimes they get executed. And so as a white person,
how do you feel about mass shootings at school?
I think they're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's
schools?
white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime. And it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men.
Okay, but that's not what he asked. And this sucks because this is where Nick is going to have an opening. So if you're talking about gang violence or whatever, then gang violence, like you said, what is it? It's out of 20,000 homicides, 10,000 homicides are black men. 90% of those homicides are committed by black men. Therefore, it's a disproportionate crime rate. Therefore, we need to address it, right? That's the per capita argument in reference to black homicides and black crime. But when it comes to mass shootings, you can say that white people are disproportionately responsible for mass shootings, like antisocial violence, like Nick said. But if you look at the stats in reference to how many people do mass shootings, what is it? 2, 3 a year? When you start eliminating the bullshit. And what I mean by eliminating the bullshit, if you go out into the parking lot and there's some like hood kids or some redneck kids or whatever, and they're playing with a gun, and they get into a beef and they shoot each other or whatever, that's considered a mass shooting because it happened on school, or it's considered a school shooting because it's a shooting that happened on school property. That's the way that they're juking the stats. Whereas what everybody envisions when you talk about a school shooting is typically a lone gunman, but obviously with Columbine, there were 2 gunmen, where they're going in on a spree killing inside a school. Okay. Yeah, sure. Exactly. There's a reason why Piers specified school shootings and not mass shooting. Yes, absolutely. And so that's kind of my thing, where you can acknowledge that, you know, white people committing spree killing, mass shootings, terrorist killings, whatever, is bad, and it's disproportionately represented by white folk. You can also say that's a fraction of a percentage of the population, which is also true. Unfortunately, I think that Nick is probably going to catch him on this, because Nick, despite getting stomped, is not a dumb guy. I didn't. I'm sorry. Okay. 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 Should or should not? Okay, that's cool. Absolutely. Okay. I might have to leave around 2. Basically, my son is having stomach issues, and the wife doesn't want to take him out in public, and she has an appointment shortly after 2.
And
what proportion?
I'm curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in these schools.
Is my mic working?
What
proportion?
Dang, Christian Blair's is saying that for all of Pierce's faults, he did the same thing with Andrew Tate. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
White people are 65% of the population, so that makes sense. This actually sucks, because if I felt like Pierce was doing really, really, really good in pressing him and showing him his own bullshit, this might play to like liberals. This might play to progressives with like 80 IQ. This does not play with anybody who has an understanding of like per capita demographic statistics, or anybody in the right wing, or any groiper. This actually, unfortunately, in my opinion, I hate to say this kind of shows that you're either stupid or dishonest. That's disappointing. It's disappointing, because if Pierce was doing so well with his line of argumentation before, showing Nick's own words to him, I think you just lost anybody who were like, oh yeah, Nick's taking a huge L. I think you just lost him. Unfortunate.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60 to 65% of school shootings by white.
No, you told me the opposite. Ooh, Nick's catching it. Nick's catching it because he's not stupid. You cannot. Nick is not an unintelligent person. You cannot sneak this by Nick.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
What difference does that make to the children lying dead on the ground?
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people. And that's the difference. The difference
I'm
is
not. What I'm saying to you is by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because you're, well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart actually, but you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, it's just not.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same for black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the
are
population.
you hearing it? No.
See, I think the trouble with your statistics is a lot of them don't bear much scrutiny. We have a bunch of fact checkers checking all this in real time because you do have a tendency to just come out with a lot of old baloney.
Dude, I'm starting to question whether or not Piers Morgan is intelligent enough for this conversation. I really am. I hate to say that. I thought he was doing an excellent job on the front end, and I'm still going to commend him for doing an adversarial interview where it actually seemed that Nick was like a little bit pressed on his own shit. And it seems like he was uncomfortable being presented with his own shit. But right here, in my opinion, he's losing the plot. The reason why he's losing the plot is because he can't concede to reality. Okay, that's the same thing. We got somebody in here who's like, oh well, you know what? We're just gonna believe cops all at the same time, dude. You can just look at the UCR. You can just look at the Uniform Crime Report by victimization. Victimization. Half of victims of homicide inside the United States are black. When you look at demographic stats for community violence, it's 90% within the same community. It still means that there's a homicide problem within the black community that needs to be addressed. If you don't trust law enforcement, you don't trust the UCR, you don't trust this, you don't trust that. I mean, whatever, that's fine. But at the same time, okay, black men die by violence at a rate probably 10 to 20 times the national average. And we should address that both before the homicides occur and after the homicides occur. That's all I'm saying.
When you say, okay, well, it's true. And when you're confronted with reality, you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings? With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both black and whites,
or what's that fraction?
Proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No, that's not the question that he asked. This is where Piers Morgan is either stupid or bad faith.
No. Tell me the number, and then
the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial marriages or relationships that may produce black people. And yet, when I point out to you that there are many parts of crime in America where actually there's a majority of white people that perpetrate them, you don't care. You don't have any interest in that. It doesn't exercise your mind. Maybe because
no one's buying this. This argument lost. No one is buying this. Everybody understands per capita, and people can even see what you race ahead and say, well, we're comparing the proportion of white and black school shooters. I said, no, compare the proportion of school shooters that are white versus violent criminals that are black, because that was the basis of the monologue, is that you're very likely, if you encounter black people,
Wicked Radiation says Team Fuentes unironically. No, I'm not Team Fuentes. I think that Pierce, like I said, did a really good job pressing him on the front end of the interview, but I feel like Pierce might genuinely not be that smart of a guy. And so he's either not tracking the conversation or he's being bad faith. And this is why Nick is running away with it right now, is because, okay, once again, should I draw this or do you guys get this? I have like a 3,000 IQ chat, so I don't think I need to draw it. I'll draw it while they continue to talk, though.
Or a young black man in the city, that you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, of a robbery, a mugging, a car theft, a carjacking, or a murder. That's the difference. And it's about proportionality. And everybody sees past that because we all live in reality. You want to talk about product of your environment. People that live in New York, Chicago, LA, we live in reality. We live in this environment and we see what it's like. And the threat, the danger in terms of probability is it's not even comparable. And I would say this to your point. If you're in a high school and truly, if you see a white person who looks like a little autistic, he's got the SSRI stare and he reaches for a backpack, people joke and say, run. Similarly, if you see a jalopy pulling up with a bunch of black people in it and they got their pants around the ankles, you're going to run also. And I'm saying the same thing. The difference is the latter happens much more often. It's much more common. You know, in Chicago, there's like 10,000 carjackings and car thefts every day. It's in the thousands. It happens all the time. How many?
Okay. So this is what Nick is saying. And if you would please consult your charts. Okay. Oh, actually, hold on. I need to make this even more different. Sorry. Let's change it to black. And then let's make it here. And then let's make it here. Now, this is a little racist, okay? So you're going to have to forgive me, okay? Okay. So these things are not mutually contradictory. These things are, as far as I understand, they're just descriptively true, okay? What Piers Morgan is saying is that white folks are 65% of the population and they contribute to 2/3 of mass shootings within schools. Therefore, white people are a cause for violence within schools. So should you be bigoted or racist or prejudicial towards white men? That's what he's saying. And what Nick is saying is that, yes, okay, we're 2/3 of mass shooters, but we're also 2/3 of the population. And if you look at mass shooters compared to the entirety of the white population, there's maybe a half dozen to a dozen, mass shootings per year that we would, and realistically, it's like 3 or 4. There are 3 or 4 mass shootings per year that we would classify as school mass shootings. And therefore, 99.9999999% of white people / white men do not participate in mass school shootings. Okay. That's what he's stating. All right. And then what he's also stating is that the black community, which is not truly black, they're more brown than they are black, but we drew them black for the sake of visualization, that within the black community, half of annual homicides in the United States, let's say there's 20,000 homicides, regardless of whether or not you trust the perpetrator numbers, sociologically, we know through studies that 90% of violence occurs within a racial group. So 90% of homicides committed within the white group are done by other whites. 90% of Asian violence is done by Asians. 90% of violence done with black folk is by black folk. And when it comes to black folk, they are half of the homicide victims in the United States. So if we extrapolate that anthropologically, it's not a moon. You're right, it's not a moon. If we extrapolate that anthropologically, then it stands to reason that the homicide rate within the black community and the crime rate within the black community is disproportionately higher than in other communities. Okay. Now, the point that I make, which is still true, that I want you guys to not be racist and not be assholes, is Nick is pointing to this. He argues it's 5%. Somebody said in chat that a third of young black men will become felons at some point during their lives. Felonies include shoplifting over $200. Felonies include felon possession quantities of drugs, which is still way too high, by the way. A third, if that's true, is way too high. But let's just bear in mind that there's felonies like robbery and stabbing people, and then there's felonies like stealing a $300 TV from a Walmart. Both of them are bad. Both of them should be punished, but one of them is obviously worse than the other, right? Okay, so my point is that if you look at the disproportionate black crime rate or whatever, do we have a smaller percentage of white folk who are committing crime? Yes, but we still need to punish those people. And then also 95%, 98% of the black community are perfectly normal, nice, happy, healthy, adjusted, middle class and working class human beings. Okay? They wake up, they put on their shoes, they go to work, they work their jobs, they pay their bills, they pay their taxes, they go home, they take care of their families, they watch Netflix, they go to sleep. That is 95 to 98% of the black population. And you should not treat those people like shit just because you heard Nick Fuentes talk about race statistics online. Okay? We good? Oh, God, I hate you guys. Chat's going crazy.
Mass shootings committed by autistic SSRI white people. I don't even know. I mean, it's probably in the single digits in the last decade in this city. That's the difference, and everybody knows that. But you're really just trying to carry water for liberal ideology.
No,
it's an ideological position.
I'm really not. I can absolutely say yes. There is way too much black on black crime, for example, involving guns in Chicago.
And black on white also.
Yes, but there is way too much gun violence in Chicago, right? I mean, it's indisputable. I've got no problem saying that. The difference is I don't then lead myself into a thought process where I have to avoid all black people in case they shoot me. And you've already conceded that you are a racist. So when people hear you then say, I don't want to be living anywhere near black people, they already have heard you say, I'm a racist. So they assume you're doing that because of people's skin color. I don't think you would.
I'll be right back. I'm going to grab some water and a snack. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. I want to thank the roughly dozen people who have already super chatted. We got Real Serious, Fell Runner, Grassroots Hegemon a couple of times, Fell Runner again, Deus Halcyon, and then Grassroots with the 5 gifted. Thank you to Grassroots with the 5 gifted. Thank you to Deus Halcyon with the gifted membership. And thank you to everybody else for the super chats. Parasocially love you. I shall be right back.
Would probably dispute that, right?
Well, you're separating two different things. The monologue, when I said I don't want to live around black people, that was after Irina Zarutska got shot, and it's true. I mean, they are largely in this city, in Chicago, the South Side, the West Side, huge criminal population, and I don't want to live anywhere near it. And I do. I want to live in a white neighborhood. I think that that's extremely desirable, and I think even black people.
Again, Nick, you're perfectly entitled to that view. But when you have obviously prefaced all this by saying, I am a racist, unashamedly, then people will assume that all your thought processes about all of these issues are driven by an aversion to people based on their skin color, which is the purest personification of racism.
Well, it's not an aversion. I would say it's the opposite. I like my own people. My own people are familiar to me, and I think that's true across the board. I think that people seek out other people that are like themselves, and every other group does this, whether it's blacks, Hispanics, Asians. You know, I get a lot of attacks when I talk about that I'm against interracial marriage. And what's funny is that every other group is against interracial or interethnic marriage. Jews,
but you're the
Chinese,
you're the product of an interracial marriage.
Yeah, I mean, that's debatable.
Not
Let's
really.
say for the sake of argument, sure.
No, you're the product of an interracial marriage, and your father is part Mexican. You're literally,
for the sake of argument,
the very person you've just told me you want to avoid.
What race is Hispanic? Is that a race?
Well, what do you think it is?
I'm asking you, what race is Hispanic?
Hispanic, of course it's a race. It's called Hispanic.
It's a mix between two races. It's a mix between indigenous Americans
it's not white,
and Europeans.
Though, is it? It's not white.
Well, you're apparently more of a racial purist than me. You got like
not
a
really. You just keep saying you only want to live in a white neighborhood, but you're literally from a mixed race background yourself. You've literally got Mexican blood.
I know, and I live in a non-white neighborhood too. I'm trying to get out of here, though. But I'm trying to get out. But here's the thing:
Do you have any non-white? Do you have any non-white friends? Genuine question.
Most of my friends are non-white. Most of my friends are not, and non-white people love my show.
How many are black?
The honesty.
How many of your friends are black?
Many of them, like at least a dozen.
Wow.
Ye being one who you know, Sneeko being another who you also know.
Yeah. So how do they feel when you say you just want to be away from any black people, walk away from them?
Well, you know what Ye told me? I'll tell you verbatim what he said. He said, so you use the N-word. I said, yeah. He goes, well, when niggas are being niggas. I said, so true. That's so true. So they feel like they're in complete agreement with me.
What did I miss?
It means that even black people.
What did I miss? Oh no, what did I miss? I'll be right back.
People know how black people can behave. Even black people understand it. And they know that it doesn't come from a place of, and you use the word aversion. That's the first thing I'll actually dispute.
Okay.
It's not an aversion on the basis of skin color, because that would seem to suggest it's like a stubborn, irrational bigotry. I don't consider myself a bigot. I consider myself a racial realist. I'm realistic about how the races are, and I speak provocatively about it. And I speak provocatively about our tribalistic instincts and tendencies as human beings. And I'm not a liberal ideologue that says that over time and with enough education, we're all going to see this great brotherhood where we're colorblind and everybody's the same. You know, I don't think that's ever going away. I think that race is real. It's not just skin deep. It matters to us and it matters to each other. And
hey, Wicked Radiation, I know you're new here, so I'm just going to share this with you. About a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, I had an intestinal issue where I lost large sections of the contents of my intestine over the course of 3 days, including blood. So when nature calls, when I need to eat, I handle it. And if somebody wants to copyright strike me because I react to their segments in good faith, I double or triple their runtime through my own commentary. But you know, they resent me for walking away for 2 minutes so I can get water in, water out. I don't give a fuck. Oh, okay. Wicked Radiation gets it. He's my ninja. Got it. All right. Mwah.
And black people know that, and Hispanics know that, and Asians know that, and people like me that have partial Mexican ancestry, we know that too. And I think on that basis, we can have mutual respect and understanding, not aversion based on skin color.
The reason I use the word aversion is you literally said that you should walk the other way if you see black people. That is an aversion to black people based on their skin color.
No, that's called economy of information. That's economy of information. That's safety. And I said in the same monologue, if you watch it, it's like, I feel sorry. The problem is you clip the 10 seconds. I don't know if you watched the whole show, but in that monologue, I said, most black people are not violent or criminals. I said, and it's unfortunate that we're going to offend them when we turn and walk the other way. I said, but the problem is we don't know. We can't tell. And someone like Irina Zarutska, she sat down in front of a black man with her headphones in and wasn't paying attention because she was being a good liberal and said, I'm not uncomfortable by this. I'm progressive. Then she got stabbed in the neck. And I said, it's unfortunate that you would have to sit behind the black man to be safe. And if he's not violent or schizophrenic, he might be offended by that. I said, but I would rather offend him than die.
How many deranged white men have committed atrocious acts of murder in the last 10 years in America?
Proportionally far fewer.
But how many?
Fewer.
How many? Do you know how many?
You have a research team. You pull it up. I don't have it in front of me.
You're obviously extremely exercised by that one story, which was horrific for the record. Absolutely.
KTC says, wow, how do you get to separate from your criminals? Unironically, economic and social mobility. So KTC, you might be asking this question sarcastically, but I'm going to answer it earnestly. So one of the problems that I look at historically when you're talking about redlining, lead paint, the slums of Baltimore, bad schools, cycles of poverty, cycles of violence, cycles of criminality, is that white mobility. You know, I'm Irish, so my grandparents or great grandparents, I forget the exact story, but they were raised in Southie. And Southie, for those of you who don't know, it's considered the rough side of Boston. It's considered like really tough. The people who live there are working class, and there has been violence and gangs in those communities. Now it's probably all gentrified, like 30 or 40, well, I guess 80 years now. But it used to be like a really rough side of town. So if you were saying that you're Irish from Southie, you're saying something. You're saying like, hey, I'm a working class immigrant from the rough side of town where murder is normal, where murder, violence, drug dealing, all that shit is normal. And so the way that my grandparents escaped that is they actually went to World War II, and they got the GI Bill, and they were veterans who started businesses, and they were able to move out of the rough side of town and move into the nice side of town. They still had to buy a cheaper house in the right side of town, but they escaped through socioeconomic mobility. And I think that if you talk to a lot of Black folk, they feel like they get slammed into working class jobs. They get stuck through bad schools on the rough side of town. And regardless of whether or not they're like a working class bro, then you get screwed over, you know? Like I think I told you guys, the first guy, the first person that I saw murdered as a law enforcement officer, he wasn't a criminal, right? He was a friend. He was a friend of the criminals. So I'll tell the story really briefly. But what ended up happening was I was breaking up fights at a bar. We're all walking outside. Somebody does effectively a drive-by. They pop off 3 or 4 rounds. They hit a guy. I go render medical aid, and the dude dies, right? Well, that guy worked target, wasn't a gangbanger, wasn't a drug dealer, wasn't an asshole, didn't beat his wife. He had no criminal record, but he was hanging out with his friends, and all of his friends were bangers. And so as a result of hanging around bad guys, he got smoked. And it's just one of those things, man. And so KTC, once again, I'm saying, like, you might be asking that question sarcastically. I'm trying to answer it honestly, that socioeconomic mobility is how you separate yourself from the criminals that are a part of your community. Grassroots says, depending on the time frame, Connor might have been arresting me at a bar. Were you in Lake County, Florida in summer of 2016, Grassroots? Because then maybe.
Horrific and should never have happened. The person who perpetrated that evil act had a string of previous offenses and should have been picked up more, and it should have been amplified more. I completely concur with all of that. But I just suspect you have no idea how many white people have committed similar crimes, do you?
No, because I know it's far fewer from experience.
Okay.
Because it's like you said. Well, and hang on. And I would add to that, you know, Irina Zarutska wasn't the first one. That was.
Sorry, Timothy Douglas asked an interesting question. What proportion of psychological harm in the country is done by school shootings versus gang shootings? I think psychological harm, you can't measure it or can't put it in money or whatever, but I do think mass shootings and school shootings are infinitely more psychologically harmful than gang shootings, because with gang shootings, we're so used to it. It's like the weather, you know? You go to the rough side of town real quick and you see people, you know, getting into fistfights, talking shit, dealing drugs, whatever. And you're just like, yep, that's how it is. You know, that's how it was 30 years ago. That's how it'll be 30 years from now. And you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, the problem's too big to fix. And then you keep it moving. So yeah, I think like gang violence on the rough side of town, we've just accepted as a country.
It's also after Austin Metcalf was killed in Texas.
Sure.
After
But
Carmelo
how many
Anthony
times has it
stabbed
been
him in the
perpetrated
neck.
by white people?
Well, hang on. Let me finish my point.
But you're
And then
implying
not
that
only
white
did-
people don't do this. And my point to you, Nick Fuentes, is of course,
Oh, I never said white people don't do
Of course,
it.
deranged white people commit heinous acts. But you don't either
No
know.
disagreement.
You neither know nor care, or maybe both. Maybe you do know but don't care. You only seem to be focused on black people who commit crimes. And again, if you hadn't prefaced the whole debate about racism by openly conceding you are a racist, I could read other connotations into what you've been saying. But once you've said, I'm a racist, and then you only talk about black crime, I think people can watch this and they can say, yeah, he's a racist. And everything that he says about crime is driven through the prism of being a racist who judges people according to their skin color.
Well, it's funny because it's quite on the contrary. And I said this in a similar monologue. You know, the problem is not that I wake up and I walk down the street and I see someone that doesn't look like me and it makes me angry. The problem is there's a pattern of behavior, which we've all seen. Blacks in America have become narcissistic, and they become narcissistic because they've been told they're victims of racism. They're victims of slavery. They've been told really there's no accountability. If they're rude, if they're inconsiderate, if they're criminal, they are told that they have no agency for their actions. They're being told if you act in this way, it's because the white man made you that way. It's because the system's rigged against you. And so we have been telling Black people this for a generation, and now there's no rules. Now they go, and what we hate to see as decent people, not even as white people, but decent people, even Black people too, what we hate to see is rudeness, obnoxiousness, inconsideration, criminality, violence. And that's that pattern of behavior that we see all over social media. On
so
the
just to
body
be clear,
cam footage,
you don't like Black people who play the victim and are rude. Is that your position?
I don't like that pattern of behavior.
And who are narcissists?
I see where this is going.
Yeah, you're ahead of me.
Turn this around on me.
You're ahead of me, aren't you? Because when I said, what Black friends have you got? You said,
I am kind of Black, aren't I?
No, not that. You said, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying your choice of Black friend is Ye, who is arguably the #1 Black victimhood narcissist in America. Do you understand the problem? So he's your friend. He's one of the very few Black people you want to be associated with, but he's the epitome of what you just said you abhor about narcissistic Black.
Timothy Douglas says, I cringe every time Connor tries to call somebody else low intelligence. Why? I'm a smart guy. You want me to upload my Stanford Binet test? I'll do it. I used to be a smart guy. I don't know if I'm smart anymore. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I've taken a lot of brain damage. Maybe I have CTE. Maybe Chud Logic's right. Maybe I just have CTE. Let me find it. Stanford Binet. Here we go. All right. I'm going to make sure this doesn't have my last name on it. And then I'm going to upload it to my drive.
People.
And then I'll pull it up.
I disagree. I disagree with you. And I'll tell you why. Because Ye, if you've ever met him in real life.
I have, yeah.
Okay, well, then you know. He's nothing but polite, considerate.
Actually, he was very rude to me the last 2 times I interviewed him. He's a supreme narcissist, and he's also.
You keep interrupting me. You're very rude. Are you Black? Because you're being very rude by interrupting me right now.
To you.
I'm giving you a hard time, but I do want to finish my point. I do want to finish my point about Ye. He is a guy who, when I was with him, wanted to make sure that everybody was heard. Everybody felt included. He's actually a very soft-spoken guy, very polite. And by the way, not violent. When you look at all the rappers that are in the music game, many of them, especially from Chicago, drill rap, they're talking about killing people, shooting people, they gangbang. He notably, if you know about him, he got his start because he was a nerd. He wore a backpack and a polo, and he wasn't a gangbanger. He rapped about his feelings and girls and his dreams and his ambitions. So no, and by the way, he would tell me all the time, he doesn't even feel Black. They make him feel not Black because he doesn't do those things, because he's soft-spoken, because he's artistic, because he's a bit of a nerd or likes fashion. So I would disagree. He's actually not like that at all.
Okay.
We're talking.
All right. Anyways, I'm going to actually pull this up because people have given me shit about this, but I'm proud of it. So I don't really care. I don't care. I'm going to share it because I earned this. Okay. So right here, this is from middle school. Stanford, blah, 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 4th definition or whatever. Connor attained a test composite of 133 on SBFE. He attained a verbal reasoning SAS of 134, an abstract visual reasoning of 124, a quantitative reasoning of 148, and a short-term memory of 111. Connor subtest and SAS scores on this administration of Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale 4th edition. Okay. So I will be the first to admit that I am an arsler. Okay. I am an arsler in many ways. Okay. And this number is probably no longer accurate. I have been punched in the face many times since middle school. Okay. I have been dropped on my head several times. I've been slammed into the ground several times. So for all I know, this is dropped to like a solid 108 or a solid 112. Okay. I have no idea what my actual IQ is. And to be honest, I'm kind of afraid to take another one because I'm worried that I might be shocked at how stupid I am. Okay. So, but I'm telling you, when I went to Stanford, no, no. But the whole point is that when people are like, oh, you're a dumb guy, you know, you're unintelligent, you don't understand things. I'm like, no, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm a pretty intelligent guy. I did very well in school. I'm capable of understanding most complex topics. And if I don't understand a complex topic, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you how I don't understand it. And I'll admit when I don't know things. So for instance, I think I've seen this guy before, so I don't know if he's fucking with me or not. But Timothy Douglas says, Jesus Christ, I cringe every time Connor tries to call someone else low intelligence. See, the way that I would read that, Timothy, and no offense if you meant it a different way, is that there's like an ableist thing with like liberals and progressives where they're like, oh, you should never call somebody unintelligent because intelligence, there's actually 7 different kinds of intelligence and IQ doesn't correlate with anything, even though it does. And as a result, like you shouldn't be ableist, right? That's one way to take it. The other way to take it is you're saying that I have no right to call people unintelligent because I myself am unintelligent. Well, I just don't think that's true. So if you meant it the first way, then you're a liberal pussy and you need to give your balls a tug. If you meant it the second way, go fuck yourself. Fair enough? All right, let's go.
He's also a Hitler-loving anti-Semite. And we're going to take a little commercial break here, and we're going to come back and talk about anti-Semitism and your views about Jewish people, and indeed what Yair said about the same subject matter.
See, this is an electrical engineer or electrical something in my chat. When we get to 50K subs, Connor and I will do a month of content of us slur maxing. He can have a head start. I can barely read. I just have to get worse at math. There you go. There you go. KTC says, I have an illiterate mechanic and I have a degree in psychology and read a book a month. Who is smarter? I don't know. Go take an IQ test. We'll find out. A proctored IQ test, not an online test.
Angel Studios are back with a new must-see documentary.
I do not care about Angel Studios, Piers Morgan.
Demanding truth and accountability. Okay, back with Nick Fuentes. Let's just turn to anti-Semitism. In your interview with Stephen Crowder last week, you answered emphatically that you don't hate all Jews. Is that correct? That's your position?
Yeah, don't pull a Xander Hall. Dude, I'm going to go take an IQ test before I do it on stream. That way I don't get a 97.
Position.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to play you this clip.
Well, I don't hate any Jews. Let me just amend that. I don't hate any Jews.
Okay. Okay. Let's play this clip.
The reason I've had it is because my opposition to world Jewry and Israel is rooted in absolute, uncontestable fact. We have the truth on our side. That's why we're winning, because we are telling the truth about the historical antagonism between Jews and Europeans, between Jews and Christians, the theological, historical, racial, cultural, and political antagonisms between organized Jewry and the Christians, organized Jewry and Europeans. And the reason that we are winning that argument is because it's real, it's true. I can prove it. I can show you. I can name the names. I can show you the paper trail, the money. That is why we're winning. That is why all of this is raising the consciousness.
When you say you have this opposition to world Jewry, I mean, it's one thing to criticize, for example, the Israeli government over what it's been doing in Gaza. I've done that myself. When you talk about world Jewry, I presume you're talking about the 15 million Jews in the world, and you are opposed to them. How does that square with your position that you don't hate any Jews?
Well, do you take issue with my use of the term world Jewry?
Well, what do you mean by that?
Or do you take issue with?
Oh, I think this is I think this is a trap. Somebody brought this up in another conversation the other day that there are Jewish organizations. It might have even been Doobie. I'm surprised Doobie hasn't jumped in here. We've been talking about Jews for at least 30 seconds. But Doobie mentioned the fact. Did you see that Alina Habba just resigned? No, but that's awesome. I can't wait for all the rats to start jumping ship. I really can't. I really can't. Do you guys remember when there was like a, I'm gonna summon him real quick. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. Let's deal with international Jewry. Doobie was saying that there are like pro-Jewish, pro-Israel organizations that use the word international Jewry or Jewry as a common term. And so he was saying that believing that international Jewry was an anti-Semitic term is in and of itself like anti-Semitic because you're not just letting people describe a sociological phenomena. That was Doobie's point. So I'm wondering if Nick is trying to set up a rhetorical trap for him where he can accuse Piers Morgan of either being ignorant or anti-Semitic for not understanding that there's Israeli organizations and pro-Jew organizations that use the word Jewry or international Jewry. Now, the thing about this is, though, that I think that definitionally, if anybody's an anti-Semite, it's Nick. And I'm not trying to pearl clutch. I'm not trying to freak out about it. I'm just trying to say that, like, when you criticize a behavior that you allege is done by 90%, 95% of a categorical group, and then you make no attempts to say, it's not the group that I'm criticizing, it's the behavior, then I think that could be classified as a form of bigotry against the group. Because you might be being descriptive, you could be being accurate. Like, so for instance, what I'm talking about is Zionism. That is what I'm talking about. But do they make fun of jewels? So weirdly enough, allegedly, I think this is bullshit. Obviously, Jewish people in medieval history were accused of being like bankers and jewelers and all that kind of stuff because they were prohibited from a bunch of other trades. Weirdly enough, I've Googled this multiple times, and I don't know whether or not I believe Google. The word jewelry allegedly comes from the French word bijou, which is the word for gift, and it doesn't have anything to do with Jewish people. That's according to Google. I don't know if I believe Google. Anyways, the accusation is that 80 to 90% of Jews are Zionists in that they support the state of Israel. I described previously how I'm a tepid Zionist. I do buy into the post-World War II narrative that a third of the international Jewish population was wiped out in Europe. The Zionist project was started in the late 19th century and early 20th century. The survivors of the European genocide moved to Israel en masse. Israel declared independence in 1948. A bunch of Arab states attacked them. You had the Nakba and the reverse Nakba. And as a result, out of 16 million Jews on the planet, 7 of them live inside Israel. 7 of them live inside the United States. And the 2 are spread out all over the planet. But the whole point is that, like, I don't care that Jews in the United States of America are 80 to 90% supportive of the existence of the state of Israel, and some of them view it as an important political project in order to support the state of Israel in order to continue to survive in the Middle East and North Africa. I just don't care. And I think that if you just go, oh, it's all like a plot, and we need to dispossess Jewish people of political power and financial power, then I think you can be safely classified as an anti-Semite. I think that's fair.
Do you have a problem with that?
Clarify what you mean by it.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. The gaslighting's crazy because I use that expression on my show all the time. I say organized Jewry, world Jewry. And do you know that for like 30 years, the World Jewish Congress has an annual keynote called the State of World Jewry? Barry Weiss has given it.
See, he tried to lay out the "you're accusing me of anti-Semitism" trap that we just talked about.
You can look it up. It's on YouTube. She gives the State of World Jewry address.
But Nick, what do you mean by it?
I mean, you have to talk about, there's a concept of Jewish peoplehood. It's the sense that they are part of a common nationality, a common tribe, a common people. And so where they reside in Israel, the United States, or Europe, or elsewhere, they see each other above, or maybe on a different level, alongside their nationality, their their state, wherever they reside. If they're in Germany, France, the United States, they.
So, sorry, real quick. I was wondering earlier if we needed a way to get past post-liberalism, right? Because post-liberalism, like I said, it seems like a Yarvinite, Curtis Yarvin, J.D. Vance kind of thing, and I think it could be accurate for saying liberalism isn't enough. Should we call ourselves lib arslers, like Larry the lib arsler? I mean, would that be based? The lib chuds, the chud libs, the lib arslers, the arsler libs. I mean, I think it would communicate what we're trying to get across. All right, sorry. My bad. That just popped into my head.
They see themselves as part of a transnational nation, of an international nation. The Jews in America, the Jews in Israel, they identify as Israeli or American, but they also have something in common. They identify as part of a common nation, which I would say there's a world Jewish population. It's world Jewry. And world Jewry has representatives. There is such a thing as the World Jewish Congress, where they actually elect, it's democratic. All the local Jewish organizations elect representatives to represent proportionally the Jewish population in their area at the World Jewish Congress. And it's sort of like Davos. It's like the World Economic Forum, but it's exclusively for members of the Jewish nation that exists across the world. And so that's a...
See, and this is, again, where I want you guys to differentiate between nation and state. Anytime somebody says nation, just conceptualize it as people. And so, again, the reason why these people, particularly ethno-nationalists, particularly Christian nationalists, is they think that Christian nationalists should be unified in their adherence to Christian ideology, and they should advocate for themselves as a politically corporative group. And then what else would it be? Like white nationalists think that Northern Europeans and Americans who are considered white should be considered a nation, okay? A white nationalist, right? And so as a result, they want to create a consciousness and a political bloc that advocates in the communal self-interest. So what Nick is saying is that the communal self-interest of international Jewish folk is so unified that it's effectively a parasitic force within American politics. And this was the same thing. And, I hate to bring up the Hitler thing, but, it's analogous. It's what Hitler believed. Hitler believed that German Jews were not actually German. They were a part of an international parasitic entity that was sapping the life energy of Germany via international banking and anti-nationalist sentiment and the promotion of communism. That's what he thinks, or that's what Hitler thought. And so this parallel narrative, this parallel narrative between Christian nationalists and Hitler stuff, if I have Jewish friends, and I know I got a few Jewish chatters or whatever, I have no problems with you being paranoid. This narrativization becoming popular again in the early 21st century is worrying, because this ethno-religious tribalism has brought us nothing but blood.
Real thing. And I didn't make that up, and that didn't come from 4chan. It's like I said in that clip, I read what they write. I read their books. I watch these speeches. I watch a speech from Barry Weiss. I pay very close attention. So that's what I mean by that. There is such a thing as it's a nation that exists across borders on a global scale. They're organized, and they have a national self-interest as that nation, as that tribe.
So if you don't hate any Jews, what do you like about them?
He's going to have a really accurate list. He's going to be like, I love their finance. I love their sense of collective identity. I love their advocacy for a clearly defined nation. Like, that was the wrong question, Piers. I love how intelligent they are. I love how cunning they are. It's gonna be bad.
Like a lot of things about them. I think they're funny. I think they're smart. I think that they're pretty remarkable people. And as Christians, especially as Catholics, we say they're remarkable. And this has been adjudicated in Catholic doctrine for thousands of years. We say that they're a witness people. And so we actually, there's provisions inside of Catholic doctrine that says we need to give them special protections because they were a witness to Christ's passion. So, this is why you can't clip the show.
See you, bud. 1, 2, 3. Parasocial love, bud.
You have to watch the whole thing. I say this repeatedly in interviews. I do think they're remarkable. By definition, they're exceptional people. It's just that there is a sort of now.
Somebody says, Connor, was I in Lake County during the burger years? I don't know what the burger years are, so I have no idea. I was in Lake County working as a cop from 2015 to 2019.
Natural opposition between them and Christians because of the theology. We believe that Christ is a Messiah. They don't. They have been a minority in Christian lands for thousands of years, and they have been pushed around and expelled, and they've been persecuted and segregated. And that's why there's a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of distrust.
Sorry, real quick. I know I'm kind of pausing at the peak of the content, but conservative liberalism says it's not the frequency of gang violence that makes it not as psychologically harmful. It's the targets. You said yourself that cops see gang violence as problems taking care of themselves. Listen, man, it's really callous and I kind of hate it, but you have what I saw, because I'm a bleeding heart, is I saw kids through a terrible parents and terrible subculture of criminality. They were inducted effectively into a criminal cult in which they had loyalty to their little micro tribe over everything else. And that's what ended up happening. They dedicated themselves to a cult, and then they killed other people or got killed as a result of it. And it was tragic because I saw the human potential that was lost by this human being sucked into gang violence. And but I think that once you see enough corpses and you also see the harm that gangs do to each other, eventually you're just like, the sooner these people get taken out, the better, because they will harm less people before they eventually end up incarcerated for life or end up getting killed. That was actually one of the things that was not tragic, but it was one of those like weird, ironic moments. There was a guy who was like in and out of jail, and it actually affected one of my supervisors. It affected one of my supervisors a lot. So this supervisor was on the job for 20 years, and he had like arrested this guy since he was a teenager. He arrested him into his 20s. He arrested them into his 30s. He'd spent 20 years incarcerating this guy. And eventually this guy ran away. And it had become like a rivalry between them that this supervisor would arrest this guy because of how frequently this guy committed crime. Well, eventually the guy who was committing crime or whatever, he fled another law enforcement agency that was, I think, in Florida, and he went in front of an 18-wheeler and he got killed. And the guy's like, I don't know how to feel about this, because on one hand, this guy will never hurt anybody else ever again. And so as a result, there's a moment of like catharsis. There's a moment of like, fuck this guy. And I'm happy he's dead because he won't hurt anybody else. But then there was also a feeling of like loss, because he'd seen the teenage kid who became the career criminal, who didn't get out of the cycle of violence, and now he's dead. Yeah, it's like if Batman lost the Joker. Super small scale, but yeah, it was kind of like his criminal rival got smoked. So yeah, like it's a lot of mix of feelings. There can be like catharsis and joy and happiness mixed with sadness, anger, and tragedy. Like that's actually one of the things about being a cop, in my opinion. A lot of cops don't feel anything because they just shut down every emotion. But I think the reason why it's so emotionally taxing is because you can experience so many different emotions all at the same time. So, yeah.
There's maybe some sense of chauvinism among Jewish people.
Christian Blair said, weren't you supposed to leave at 2 p.m.? Yes, but my wife did technically say 2:30, so I'm going to hang out with you guys for another 9 minutes. I just wanted to give myself some latitude so she could get out the door. But realistically, I'm having a good time, and I like hanging out with you guys. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. We do have roughly a dozen donations today. Thank you to Grassroots, Real Serious, Fell Runner, Grassroots, Fell Runner, Grassroots, Deus Halcyon, and Grassroots. Thank you for the 5 gifted Grassroots. Thank you to Deus Halcyon for the gifted memberships. Thank you to all the other things that I called out for super chats. Parasocial, love you. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them.
So there is, like I said in that clip, there is an historical antagonism between these two peoples, between Christendom and Jewry, and that has always been the case in Europe. But I don't hate them, and I think I actually sort of understand them in a weird way. I think that because I've studied a lot of their politics, I think I really kind of know them in a way, and it doesn't come from a place of hatred.
Do you have any Jewish friends?
I do. I have many, yes.
But that's weird because
they're all Catholic converts.
Because you said this.
Jews and Christians have never been friends, ever. Not since Jesus Christ fought with the...
Dude, the clip lords, man. The clip lords. The clip lords are killing it. Honestly, I feel like Piers Morgan set up a trap that let Nick get out a little bit, but the clip lords are killing it.
Pharisees. Have we ever been friends? Not since Saul was leading the charge persecuting the Christians. Not since the Roman Empire, not since the Middle Ages. Never. We've never been friends. We've never been allies. We've always been set against each other, actually. And even here in the United
Grassroots says, I was a 136. I promise you I'm sitting in the low 40s now. Nice.
United States, it was communist Jews who were the architects of both communism and the civil rights laws that are dispossessing white Christians of their land and civilization.
The Jews and Christians have never been friends ever, except for you and your Jewish friends.
Yeah, so easy. As peoples, as nations.
Got it.
Not saying every individual Christian, and of course there have been Christians and there have been Christian converts to Judaism, Jewish converts.
Timothy says, I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm saying it's cringe. I don't care. I'm an ableist.
Christian. You're nodding your head, but you're asking this. I'm saying as peoples, they've never been aligned.
As a Roman, I'm a Catholic like you, and I have many Jewish friends. I'm just trying to compute what you're trying to say, which is Jews and Christians have never been friends ever. And I'm like, well, you have Jewish friends. I have Jewish friends. We're both Catholics. Therefore, we're Christians. It's all
Ooh, Pierce identifies as a Catholic? That's crazy.
Doesn't really quite add up.
Well, like I said, as peoples, there has been an historical antagonism as peoples. And you could even say the same about blacks in the United States. Of course, there were black and white people that were friendly with each other, but in many ways, they were set against each other as groups. And I think that's easy enough to understand.
The reason that many people think you're anti-Semitic is that you have regularly downplayed the Holocaust, and in particular, the number of Jewish people who were murdered by the Nazis. It's been said that you believe no more than several 100,000 have been killed. And I want to play you this clip.
Blood123 says, I'm an astrophysics PhD student with a master in physics and a bachelor's as a physics and math double major and astronomy minor. I don't know if you're making stuff up, but if that is, that's amazing. That is amazing.
People talk about, well, what about the gas chambers? Well, to the extent that that's real, I find that hard to believe, but to the extent that's real, there have been atrocities committed and genocides committed in all times and all places. Let's acknowledge why Hitler casts the long shadow, because that confers a political benefit upon Jews. That's why.
It doesn't really sound correct to me. Wait a second. It takes 1 hour to cook a batch of cookies, and you have 15 ovens, probably in 4 different kitchens, right? Doing 24 hours a day, every day for 5 years. How long would it take you to make 6 million? I don't know. It certainly wouldn't be 5 years, right? The math doesn't seem to add up there.
You think that's funny?
It's funny. It's amusing what you're doing because, that one was a joke. But do you want to talk seriously about the Holocaust?
Yeah, I do, actually. I mean, I do, because I just find it extraordinary that you would think the Holocaust could ever be something that we could joke about.
No, please. I only have a few minutes. Why aren't we getting into the really good stuff right now? Like, listen, I've had a blast. I was not expecting to get the liquid hot content out, but man, this has been good. I gotta say, Piers Morgan had it in the first half. Nick Fuentes picked up the gauntlet. He got him on the per capita stuff, but then now it's kind of like a contest going back and forth. I still feel Nick. I still feel like Nick is gonna get like smacked up by these clips, but realistically, like I do think that Nick is. Yeah, some people are saying like Nick finds his flow, catches his stride, and then he owns. I mean, the Hearshot likes Nick, so take that with a grain of salt. But at the same time, it's like this is a brutal debate, man. Brutal. If I had, if everybody was bringing up my old clips, I'd be like, yeah, I disavow. And they're like, you said that yesterday. And I'd be like, yeah, I disavow that. I could see how that would be upsetting. Let's see if Nick can be quick about this. All right. I only have a couple of minutes before I got a jet, unfortunately. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Thank you to the Oilers. Thank you to Grassroots. Thank you to Fell Runner. Thank you to Dr. Zayas. Thank you to Deus Halcyon. And thank you to Reels. God, what a wild day. We do have tomorrow as well, obviously.
Why, too soon?
No, he hit him with the too soon. He went to the destiny line of argumentation. No.
Is it too soon to make jokes?
How many people do you think died in the Holocaust? How many Jewish people?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 7 million. What's the number?
Dude, no. I have to make a joke. Before we leave. Sees a cute Jewish girl. I think it's 12 million. No.
6 million, something like that.
So you
8 million?
You concede that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust?
Possibly more. Possibly, we're discovering all the time.
Oh, he's being sarcastic. Sees Jewish girl. I think it was 18. Oh, no.
Could maybe even be more than that.
So why have you doubted the numbers in the past?
I'll tell you why. I really think that every death is a tragedy, however many Jewish people died in the Holocaust. And I'm not a World War II historian, so I'm actually open to believing the official narrative, and I've read some of the conspiracy theories. And to tell you the truth, it's a rigorous debate. But what's interesting about this is in many countries, it's not even legal to talk about it. And that's really where my interest in the Holocaust begins and sort of ends, to tell you the truth, is that if you wanted to question the number, you would be put in jail in about, 17 or 18 European countries. And I think that's really the more interesting conversation, which is that this is almost like a religious dogma in the West.
Blade says, Counterpoints, it's kind of funny that his 3 black friends are Yace, Nico, and Myron. Indeed, friend. Grassroots, thank you for the 20. I'd like to start every conversation with, I will disavow these statements. My thoughts are not my own, and I've never met this person. Bro, that's me. Yeah, sees Jewish girl. You know what? Maybe Israel needs more weapons. No. Bad, Connor. So we got almost exactly an hour into it. We probably skipped a little bit of the intro or whatever, but man, what crazy content, guys. Crazy content. All right. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.